Thank you for coming here so early in the morning. Hope you had a good night. As I have already told you, I brought with me some, not Alka-Seltzer, it's the aspirin if needed. So my first language is German, not English, so please be kind with me. It's also my first presentation here at E2E. Let's hope it will work. Thank you. I'd like to show you how you can build a lab based on the Nutanix Community Edition. Let's start maybe with a short poll. Who of you does run any sort of a home lab or a smaller lab? Okay, couple. What do you use as a hypervisor? Who uses Hyper-V? Okay. Xen server? ES6? Nutanix? Okay. So let's have a look. First about me, my name is René Bigler. I'm coming from Thun, Switzerland. That's near Bern in the Bernese Oberland. I work in the public education sector at a vocational college or vocational school in Switzerland. We have about 3,500 students, part-time students mostly. My main tasks in daily business are also all the things around Citrix, Nutanix, Eagle or Agile technology, SIM clients. We use FS Logics, profile containers together with Office 365 and are moving to Nutanix now. That's maybe the reason why I wanted to build a Nutanix HCI Lab to test something and to learn. So I've put together a short agenda for you. What is in this Nutanix Community Edition will be one of the topics. How Nutanix works. I have a video, maybe we will skip this because we have not enough time, so I would like to have a couple of minutes at the end of the presentation to show you a live demo, if everything will work. I've also done a recording, just in case. The limitations that come with Citrix, with Nutanix Community Edition, what are the basic settings you have to do, how can you tweak the setup to run it on particularly Intel NUCs. I built my lab on it's a 4-node cluster on the 6th generation Intel NUC platform and a short demo. So, what is Nutanix Community Edition? Basically, it is the free version of Nutanix AOS, Acropolis operating system. It's the same operating system that's also running on the commercial hardware of Nutanix. By the way, it's not only available from Nutanix themselves, there's also edition running on Dell, Lenovo and Cisco, and I think they have announced something about HP hardware also shortly. Their own hardware is Supermicro, something from Supermicro, I guess. The main focus of the Nutanix Community Edition, it is designed for test driving its main feature on your own hardware and infrastructure. So please make sure it's not intended for productional use cases. There's no support, there's only community support. So it's not a good idea to put it in production, I think, but for a lab, it's a really cool solution in my opinion. So what's in this Community Edition? Community Edition comes only with the Nutanix Hypervisor, Acropolis Hypervisor. So there's no way to run Hyper-V, ESX, or Xen the latest, on top of Nutanix Community Edition. You have this possibility on the commercial edition of Nutanix, but in Community Edition you can only, it's based on AHV. So basically it's a KVM fork somehow. But you get the same management tool. Nutanix calls it Prism Web Console. It's a browser-based management tool where you can deploy your VMs, manage the whole cluster, do reportings and have insights in the performance of your system. You will get also command line management, the Nutanix CLI access to do more special configurations, or if you want to script something, that's possible. It's limited, the Community Edition, to a max of 4 nodes, so you can officially only build a 4-node cluster, that's the max. You can choose also to do just a single node cluster, but that's not really cool, because much of the features are depending on this multi-node setup. So 1, 3 or 4 node cluster is possible with Nutanix CE. It's quite easy to install. You have to download installation image and put it on a USB device and put your hardware from this USB thumb drive. I will show you later how this can be done. Yeah, let's skip this one. So what's the recommended hardware? Basically, you should have the minimum of 4-core CPUs in your hardware. There's a way to make it running just with 2 cores also. I will show how you can tweak the installer file to make this possible, but more cores is better. More RAM is better. Nutanix uses a lot of RAM. It's based on on a controller VM, CVM on every host running, and the minimum, official minimum for the CVM is 12 gigabytes per CVM. So there's not much left for running your workloads. For the NIC, it has to be an Intel-based NIC. Probably the biggest issues you will have with your storage adapters somehow. If you use an old Dell PowerEdge to set it up, there are troubles with this H.700 PERC controllers and all this stuff. So that's maybe a problem. It will run or it will not run. So test out, read the forums. There are lots of posts of people who have done this and say which combination will work and which not. So storage is based on, basically per node you have to have 2 drives. One is a SSD drive, and the second one can be a spinning disk. For booting and for the system image, you have to put in this thumb drive, or you can do also a SATA DOM or whatever to boot the system from this. Other recommendations and tips. If you decide to start with a single node cluster, with just a 1-node cluster, be aware that you cannot expand your cluster later and tie in a second or a third one. If you start with a single one, you have to wipe it and start over again. So if have the possibility and have enough hardware, it's always good to start with a 3-node cluster. You can expand the 3-node cluster to a 4-node cluster, that's possible. Then use static IP addresses for the hypervisor hosts and this controller VMs running on top of every host. Do not use 192.168.5.0 subnet. It's somehow used for internal communication, and it will break your setup if you do it. You can do nested deployments on ES6, but that's not cool. So it's always better to run it on bare metal. As I've said, spend your bucks or your money on memory and cores better or rather than on storage, because Nutanix has a deduplication and compression features, so storage is probably not the issue. It's the RAM and it's the cores you have available. Use high quality USB drives for the image. The low cost drives will die after a couple of weeks, months, depends. If you want just have a look at the management interface, there's also available a demo set up in the cloud. You can consume for free for about 2 hours, I think. You have to sign up for this. Other limitations with this community edition are your cluster requires always internet connectivity, so that might be a problem if you run it at your work where you have a proxy and you have not access to the proxy guys or can manage this yourself. TCP/80 and 8443 have to be open outbound to sending telemetry data to Nutanix. That's the price you have to pay to use this free edition. They call it Pulse. Pulse is their telemetry system calling home. You must upgrade within 30 days when an upgrade is available from Nutanix, so you can't stay on older builds for longer than 30 days, or you can just not log in anymore into your Prism web interface. That may be another issue. You have to sign up for this Nutanix Next account to download, and this Next account will also be linked to your login of your cluster. That's why probably you have to have always internet access for your cluster. And of course it's community edition, so there's no real support from Nutanix. The guys are very active in the forums. There's also a community that helps you, Twitter, but you can't open a case. So what have you do for preparation if you decide to give it a try? You have to register for this Next account to be able to download the basic image, download this install image from the Nutanix Next community forum. Then you have to burn or to put this image on your thumb drive. You can use Rufus, maybe some other guys showed it on Windows available, I think only. On Mac you can just do the DD to put the image on. And have enough IP addresses available for your setup. You need 2 IPs per node, one for the host, another one for this CVM, and then of course IP addresses for your workloads. Another one, if you do more than a single node cluster, is this virtual IP for the virtual cluster IP of your cluster. So that makes 3 IPs for a single node cluster, subnet, mask, and gateway. Burn this image, extract this image first, and burn it or put it on your thumb drive. And here, let's see.
Hi, and welcome to the Nutanix Community Edition.
It's a video. It's on YouTube. You can download it just to show you the setup. It takes about 10 minutes maybe per node to set up your node from this USB drive. The USB drive has to stay in your host during operation. It's not only for the installation, it has to stay in there all the time. So move on. That's what I show here. That's the basic setting. You have this hypervisor, and on top of every host is running this controller VM. It does the storage management, it does the failover management and all this stuff. It runs the Prism dashboard. So if you boot from the USB drive, that's how it looks. Then you just have to log in with the user install. Select your language. Put in the IP address for the host, subnet mask for the host, gateway of the host, and the IP address for this controller VM, CVM, that will run on top of the hypervisor. And if you want to build a 3 or 4 node cluster, don't click the create single node cluster, because that's the problem, you can't expand it. So if you want to go with a 3 node cluster, you have to repeat this 3 times on all of your hosts without checking this create single node cluster option, and then you have to create your cluster via CLI command. So, depending on your hardware, maybe about 10 minutes until you're good to log in to the controller VM, and then you will get presented with this Prism management interface. On first logon, you have to change the default password and do the linking to your next account. After you put in the local login, you will get asked to enter your Nutanix login, so you can match the cluster to your account. That's what you're seeing here. So it can send over the data to Nutanix. That's basically what the basic steps for the installation of every host is. So, I told you the minimum is officially this 4-core CPUs you have to use, but you can tweak the installer setup. I've done this on my setup. I have this 6th generation Intel NUCs. They have only dual-core CPUs. Just log in with the root user, Nutanix/4u is the default password, and do the edit here. can set this minimum cores, lower it to 2 cores. Basically it's 4 and lower it to 2 and the installer will run. You can also lowering the minimum required for the CVM, as this controller VM memory setup, but probably it's not a good idea, especially if you want to check out the compression features, the deduplication features. So I would start with the basic 12 giga, I think it is, per VM, per controller VM setup. But there is a way, and a couple of guys have done this and reported back, it runs with 8 gigabytes per controller VM. But without these special features, you have no chance to test compression and all this stuff. Also, this is done by tweaking the installer file customer. If you decide and have the possibility to build a 3 or 4 node cluster, don't take this create a single node cluster we have seen in the video. Just install all your nodes, connect to one of your CVMs via SSH, PuTTY may be the tool to use. And then you have to manually create your cluster, manually set up the DNS settings, NTP settings, and all this stuff. I put the commands here in my slide deck, so you can use it as a reference to create a multi-node cluster. Couple of CLI commands you have to run to do it from the command line. So that's it. Some other commands that might be useful, especially the proxy server, if you have one in your setup, because you can't log in when there's no internet access. So that's my setup is based on 4 of this Intel NUCs, 6th generation. I hadn't money to build it on top of the latest Skull Canyon devices, but I also wanted to see how it works with spinning disk and SSD. So in the Skull Canyon you have only these 2 M2 slots, so performance-wise, it's not a problem because you have this hot tiering of the data in the SSD, and the cold data is written back to the spinning disks, and disk performance was not an issue for me. My issue is the RAM and the CPU cores. Nutanix has also developed this MCS plugin for Citrix customers. You can use it, the same MCS plugin that they published for the commercial edition, also with Nutanix CE. It's basically a plugin you have to install on your DDCs, and then it integrates in the Citrix Studio setup. I can show you later, and you can provision your Xen Desktop, Xen Apps servers within Studio without CLI and anything. So now let's try. Let's connecting back, calling home. So that's this Prism interface you get with Nutanix CE. It's basically the same interface you also have in the commercial edition of Nutanix. It's HTML5 based, so no Silverlight, no Flash. Quite a cool interface in my opinion, with the basic dashboard overview. Here you see my 4 hosts running in 4 blocks, because it are separate cases. On the commercial edition with this Supermicro setup hardware, they basically have 4 nodes cases where you have 4 nodes in one block, they call. You see how many VMs are running on top. Of the 6 VMs, 4 are this controller VMs. 1 controller VM on every host. Basically, the first thing you will have to do after setting up your cluster is network configuration. Here you can create the networks you will use for your VM workloads. Really simple, nice GUI, I find. Name it, the VLAN tagging, and oops. So that's the first step. The second step you will have to perform is creating on top of your aggregated storage over all these 4 nodes. This is called storage container at Nutanix. That's where your virtual disks will be placed when you create a VM. It's basically a container. You can set up some advanced settings to do the compression sync, to do the dedup sync, and all this. Now it's installed, maybe. Here I had 105 VMs on my 4-node cluster. It was a provisioned Xen desktop, non-persistent VDIs, and it's not a problem as long as you don't start them, because they don't use. I just wanted to see how fast runs this MCS creation of the cloning. So basically, it's not a cloning. They call it write on read or something like this. So it's not a syn cloning, it's some other technology they use. That was the network configuration we saw also live. You can do a couple of storage containers with different settings. Maybe for your server VMs you want to do deduplication, but not for your VDI, because the VDM is some sort of syn cloning and dedup is not necessary for this. So these compression settings. Erasure coding is supported with 4-node cluster only. To create a new VM, you go. These are my provisioned VDIs, and as long as they don't run, they don't consume any CPU and memory. To create a new VM, you have to put in the name, assign how many vCPUs, cores, memory. Then you want to attach a disk, create a disk. And here is where you choose on which of the storage containers the disk will be placed. Then you insert your ISO image for the installation. You have uploaded into the image service, it's called Nutanix. You attach a network adapter, and the VM gets created. And you can start it, power on. and you can connect to your VM within this Prism management interface. So no RDP or whatever you might want to use is necessary. And boot your VM. So maybe we are back here. Yep. Let's have a look at this MCS plugin, if it works. There's my mouse. The creators update did this mouse issue on Citrix. Here we are. You have this integration with installed MCS plugin into the Studio console. You can create the resources and so basically it's the same as with Xen server. You can choose the snapshot you want to clone and how many. Now it's here. Wi-Fi stocks here. You can choose the lab resources. And here you have your storage containers from the Nutanix we built in Prism. We select the container with the golden image, the snapshot you want to clone, network settings. How many? So, and it's the same with Xen server, I think. Well, and your machine catalog gets created. The master image will be copied from the golden image, and then the VMs will be created through this MCS plugin. By the way, they released also a Directive plugin now. Maybe someone has seen this, where you can monitor IOPS, I guess, throughput, and a couple of other data within Citrix Directive of the performance of your Nutanix cluster. So that's basically is what I wanted to show you. Any questions?
Do you maybe know what are the main differences between Nutanix Community Edition versus commercial one?
Yeah, the basic difference to the commercial edition is on the commercial edition you can choose the hypervisor. You can run on AHV, that's this KVM fork of their own hypervisor. You can also run Xen server on top on the commercial edition, ESX or Hyper-V. And of course you get support, and the hardware is much more performant, and drivers and everything is no issue. So.
But feature-wise, it's the same.
Feature-wise, it's basically the same. You're limited here to just 4 nodes. That's the max. On commercial edition, you can go up to, I don't know what's the limit.
Thanks.
Other? Okay. Thank you very much.